So tourist development tax in the state of Florida, there are laws attached to what each penny can and cannot be spent on. Lots of laws and statutes. And in every county, they then have the right to charge 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, depending on how big their collections are.
What's going on, Sarasota? We are back with episode number 94. As always, my name is Brad Hannon.
Trey Martell.
Felipe Colon.
And we've got somebody that has probably more ability to speak on Sarasota than we've ever had before. We've got Erin Duggan from Visit Sarasota. Welcome to the podcast, Erin. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We are excited to dig into what Visit Sarasota is and does for our community. But before we even ask any questions, I want you to lay the foundation of exactly what I said. What is Visit Sarasota in a nutshell?
Sure. So we are a 501c6. We are a private-public partnership. And our job in a nutshell is to make sure Sarasota County shines on the world stage. So we want to make sure that we're promoting Sarasota County as a tourism destination. And we do that in a variety of really cool ways. But another kind of easier way to talk about what we do is we say we put heads in beds. I mean, at the end of the day, we are trying to put heads in beds because, as you can imagine, when folks are staying in one of our hotel rooms, not only are they paying tourist development tax, which we'll talk about, but they're paying sales tax too, and then they're infiltrating our restaurants and our attractions and our,
I love that one.
And spending money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we want them to do. And I mean, when you really look at the full circle, they then leave to go back home to where they're working and making that money, but they've left all of those fabulous tax dollars and, you know, the dollars that they've spent in the community. So that's really why tourism's so important.
I love it. It sounds like we are on the same mission, right? We maybe aren't putting heads in the beds, but we, Sarasota SpeaX podcast, we want to shine Sarasota on the world stage, as you said. I love the way you put that. So what are some of the actual, day-to-day functions of Visit Sarasota? Is it, we see commercials sometimes being in Sarasota. We may see commercials for Visit Michigan or, different, I don't know why Michigan came to mind. That's probably the
Pure Michigan. They have a big brand. They actually do have a big brand.
I think I have seen some commercials, but is that what it's Pure mainly Michigan. Doing, or just kind of
Pure Detroit? Like, okay,
Pure Michigan. What is Visit Sarasota on a daily basis doing? Like, what does that look like?
Sure, that's a fantastic question because so often the work that we're doing as a local, you wouldn't see it, and I wouldn't want to pay for you to see one of our ads. We're really trying to target those that are not here to come here. But if I had to kind of talk about it at a high level, I'll talk to you a little bit about departments. So first and foremost, we have a marketing and communications department. They're the ones that are overseeing our agency of record. They're designing our ads. They're the ones that's kind of managing our brand. Obviously, when it comes to our advertising, we are really trying to be as lean and mean as we can. We don't like to just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. We do, I'd say, overwhelming, mostly digital advertising. We're mostly doing very specific targeting based on behaviors, which we can get into. But that marketing department is managing visitsarasota.com, managing our social media pages. We talk a lot about content. We have to create content on all of these really cool things that there are going on in Sarasota County, not just the city of Sarasota, but Sarasota County. So that's Northport, Inglewood, Manasota, Siesta Key, Longboat Key, Welland Park, all of these different communities that have all of these amazing things going on. But that's kind of our marketing department in a nutshell. They're also managing our public relations. So we have a public relations firm. Lou Hammond is their name, but they actually are a PR firm that focuses on travel and tourism. So we are perpetually working with journalists to tell the Sarasota County story. So it could be just pitching them, sending them some images, sending them some content, and then all of a sudden we've got a 2-page spread in Southern Living. But that also could be we're hosting journalists. So a lot of times, I'd say pretty much almost 365 days a year, we're hosting somebody within Sarasota County in some capacity. We also have PR arms based in Europe. We have one in the UK and one in German. So again, same thing happening there, working with tour operators, travel agents, journalists to tell that Sarasota County story. Mostly, we're able to communicate it without hosting, but a couple of times a year we'll host FAMs. I know I heard you say the term junket, which is
explain these terms. FAMs
I know,
and junket.
I love that term too.
I gotta know both of these terms.
FAM is short for familiarization trip, but again, hosting folks, not paying them. Just
when you say
hosting
hosting,
them.
it's kind of like we'll put them up at the St. Regis, or we'll put them up at the hotel at our expense, kind of thing. Let them
Or
experience
Felipe's
Sarasota
spare bedroom,
with the hope that they have an amazing experience. They go back to their journalism career and write a nice article about us.
Absolutely, and the good news too about most of the FAM trips that we're doing in Sarasota County is we're working with folks who are happy to host them. So it could be a hotel that's hosting them, a restaurant that's hosting them. So, and I always like to say too, and I don't know about you, and I'm looking at a magazine right now on the table, but you see an ad, maybe you go to the URL, maybe you don't, but if you read a 2-page story, you might be a little bit more inspired to buy that suit or to buy those shoes or to go on that trip. And so I'm a big fan of PR in the space that we work in, and having journalists and influencers tell the story because it's a little bit more authentic then. So that's kind of sales and marketing in a nutshell. We have what I call a sales department. So I always like to say they're the folks that boots on the ground, shaking hands, kissing babies. They're the ones that are going to these shows, whether they're meeting with meeting planners, whether they're meeting with coaches, whether they're meeting with event right holders. But our industry is very relationship based. You can't just build it and expect that they will come. You have to make sure that that if you're a coach and you're coaching rowers, that they know we've got a rowing facility where you can train. So we're working with a variety of groups. It can be, and there's another fun term in that category called SMERF. SMERF, but it's basically like
not
social.
Not the blue people?
Not the blue people, but like social, military, fraternal, so there's a whole bunch of leisure markets that we can go after, business markets that we can go after, and a whole bunch of sports markets that we can go after, and then we have visitor services. So, think about when someone's here, if they have a really great experience, first and foremost, they're going to spend a little bit more than maybe they had planned because they're going to learn about something that they didn't know and they're going to go and do it. But what mostly happens from our visitor services efforts is we see folks realize, oh my goodness, there's so many cool things happening here. I can't do it all. I'm going to come back. Or Felipe and I were talking a second ago, you ultimately might end up moving here, moving a business here, moving a satellite office here, remote working here. So we do a lot in that space too, but in a nutshell, that's kind of what we got going on.
So is that one of your goals? Do you track those metrics from people that visit that become residents? Do you want them to become residents?
That's a fantastic question, because when I started 20 years ago, the answer would have been absolutely not. Every time we lose a visitor to a resident, we have to replace that visitor with a brand new
lost
visitor,
client
right?
in your business, yeah.
And anybody that is in business, that a repeat visitor is less expensive to market to than a first-time visitor, right? Well, we've learned and we've grown, and now absolutely, not only would I say we want folks to move here to work or to retire or to open a business, but we actually have an audience, a vertical called relocation and workforce, where we actually specifically market.
Wow.
And what I always like to try to explain to people is, first and foremost, you're not going to move here without visiting first. So to my hoteliers.
You'd be surprised.
We've actually had
a lot of houses get bought sight unseen around here.
We've had more than one guest that has moved here because they knew this is where they wanted to be without ever being here. Marcus is one that strikes me. Marcus, who's Sarasota Paradise.
Yes.
And that was from overseas.
Yeah, I believe he moved overseas here. I think he might have visited before though, but there is times where we talk to people that they moved here.
That's amazing.
They just knew this was a great area, moved here, took a chance on it, and it worked out. So maybe it's the marketing efforts.
No, but you are right. These last few years especially have been kind of
COVID.
different, right? Yeah. But historically speaking, what we've said to our hoteliers is, listen, we feel like the relocation vertical is a good vertical for us to be in, because we don't want to just rest on our laurels and get who we get. We want to target the right person. We want to target the person that we want to be our neighbor. And I know it sounds silly, but it's the truth. We want to target the person who's going to pick up their own trash and who's going to go to our art galleries and go to our attractions and be philanthropic and give to nonprofits and be good citizens of the community. So, there's a lot going on. And then we do have a community relations partnership program as well. I always like to say because again, we're private public. So we've got the public dollars that we're managing, but then we also have over 500 businesses in Sarasota County that choose to partner with us.
Oh, wow.
And so
Is partner a way of saying put in money?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what makes it the private-public partnership.
What does the business get out of it? Just out of curiosity.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
it would be like tourism-friendly businesses, obviously benefiting from you bringing in people. But is there another benefit that it maybe? Unseen?
Sure. So I always kind of say that's the chamber-esque side of the job, because you're right. A company, if they're going to give us money, they want value, they want benefits. So basically, you're going to get a listing in our You're going to get a listing on our website. You're going to get a listing in our visitor guide, of which we print about 100,000 a year, and do a pretty darn good job distributing them. You're going to have collateral in our visitor center, and then we're going to pitch you. We're going to, talk to the journalists about you, bring them to you. We're going to include you in our content, social media, those sorts of things. So in a nutshell, that's what you're going to get. But there's also some business to business opportunities. We do in fact, we had a partner coffee this morning out on St. Armand's Circle. We do after hours. We celebrate National Travel and Tourism Week events. So we have events every year. And I will say, we work really hard to make our events very different than the Chamber's events, because we don't want to compete with the Chambers.
Right.
The Chambers are actually they're our brothers and our sisters in this. We're doing something very different than them. But the B2B connections of our partners, that's something that they really enjoy.
So would you say you guys kind of almost have a monopoly on representing Sarasota to the outside in terms of that guide and connecting the businesses, or would you say that you kind of share that with the Chamber a bit? I'm trying to think of this in terms of business terms, because what you guys do is so specific and out of the box that it's a little hard to wrap your arms around.
I don't think that the Chambers would say that they're marketing themselves outside of the county. Most of the Chambers here in Sarasota County, and there's a lot of them, Inglewood, Northport, Venice, Siesta Key, Sarasota, we work very closely with all of them. They're more helping their businesses connect, and they, rely on us to help, in essence, market Sarasota County.
Yeah.
But we do partner with them. In fact, our visitor centers, one is the front of the Sarasota Chamber. It's a win-win. They love that we're paying them a little bit of rent, and we're the ones that are, welcoming people as they're walking through the door. We do the same thing with the Venice Chamber. And then the rest of the chambers, we have kiosks in their offices. And again, we give them a stipend for having that kiosk in their office, and it's got some Visit Sarasota County like collateral. Yes.
So this may be a naive view of it, or kind of off the wall, but I picture like the visitor centers, like you're coming into Florida, it's like visitor center, right? Or you're going into Georgia, it's like stop by the Georgia Visitor Center, and you've got all the pamphlets and they tell you about it. Is Visit Sarasota because you guys are right across the street, right?
The visitor center is,
The visitor center is right across the street. Is that like open door? People that are visiting would stop in there to maybe get advice, get recommendations and things like that. And how often does that actually happen? Because we live in a virtual world now where people are looking at Yelp and such to figure out what they're going to do in town, not necessarily the visitor center. But how often are people stopping in to say, hey, what do we do here?
Yeah. So, we look at it every year to make sure, first and foremost, that it makes sense to continue to deliver visitor information in that way. It does. Our numbers are actually pretty good. People drive by it, they see visitor center, they swing in and stop in. Our visitor centers are run overwhelmingly, predominantly by volunteers, which is also another really fantastic thing. Now, we treat our volunteers really well. We take them on field trips, and we give them professional development opportunities.
So like junkets?
Like junkets. They do get to go on mini junkets. Actually, honestly, because if there's some new exhibit, the museum wants them to see it. If there's some new restaurant, the restaurant wants them to come in. But
we call that due diligence in my business. You got to know what you're selling in order to sell it properly, right?
But to your point, we also have a visitor center in the airport. The airport actually gives us that space by baggage claim for free. That is also run by volunteers, our volunteers, and the airport's volunteers. And then really cool, and I don't know if you've ever seen her, Ava. She's our area visitor assistant. She has a Class B RV. She goes to where the tourists are. So she'll be at farmers markets. She'll be at sporting events. But again, it goes back to that. It's a mobile visitor center.
And that one's probably the most impactful. I'm sure you're going to where they're at. So.
Absolutely.
What, just some database questions, where do we see the most visitors from? You can just say state, like Sarasota County. Where are we getting the most visitors from?
Okay, so we've been talking about what an interesting few years this has been, because what a shift that we've seen in the last 5 years. I mean, first and foremost, visitation went a lot younger. You know, we started to see a much younger demographic pop up. But to answer your question, really, Midwest, Northeast, absolutely are going to remain two very big markets for us. And
cold places.
Cold places. And interestingly enough, in the last 12 to 18 months, we have seen visitation dip a little bit.
Really?
Month over month, we have started to see some minor dips in occupancy, some minor dips in economic impact.
What are we, you know?
What attributes?
Yeah.
So, great question. So, what has attributed to that most interestingly is that in-state visitor. And that makes sense. I think a lot of Floridians for the last 3 to 5 years, if you were traveling, you were kind of traveling in your backyard. You were going, for us in Sarasota, maybe doing a weekend in Naples or, checking out, the parks in Ocala and the Panhandle or in Miami. And so that is where we have seen our dip in the last year and a half. Is I think that Florida resident now is doing the cruise. They're doing Portugal. They're doing Spain, and that's to be expected, because the last few years we had a little bit of a we were calling it shooting fish in a barrel. In 21, 22, 23. So yeah, it's been interesting because people keep saying, like, well, I'm surprised the numbers are down when everything seems up. And so I do keep saying it's really kind of that drive market where we're seeing a dip.
Well, not to be negative, though, but they could also be cash strapped. I mean, if you look at the kind of the in-state staycation kind of consumer, those people aren't having as fun of a time this year as they were maybe a couple of years ago, based on the other data we see.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and you might very well be right, but we haven't seen that yet pop up in our data, but we are absolutely looking at that. It's funny because when I talk to residents, they talk a lot about traffic, and they always want to,
We'll talk a little bit about traffic.
They can talk about traffic too. And listen, I'm a resident. I grew up here. No one likes
Born and raised?
Not born, but raised. Fruitville Elementary, McIntosh Middle, Riverview High School.
That's pretty far back. I think she gets the pass there.
But in our research, and we use a third-party firm to do our research, and I love research because it's honest. It tells you the truth. Traffic never pops up with our visitors because it's all relative. If you're coming from Chicago, if you're coming from Atlanta, if you're coming from New York, they don't call this traffic.
Right.
Or
it's
if
not
you're
gridlocked.
Yes. Or if you're out on Siesta Beach and you're 5 minutes away from a daiquiri, you're not in a bad mood because of the traffic. So it's all relative. But to your point, that is something that we're looking at. I know that there have been years where gas prices have impacted travel, and you'll see hotels do free gas cards and things like that. So we look at the data to try to figure out how can marketing help us fix that problem.
Hey, we are having a blast here getting to know Erin and all about Visit Sarasota. If you want to get to know Erin a little bit deeper, stay tuned for rapid fire questions fueled by food and beer.
I'm Erin Duggan with Visit Sarasota County, and this is Rapid Fire.
10 random questions, 10 specific answers, nothing off limit. This is Rapid Fire fueled by food and beer. Do you have a favorite musical artist?
My music taste is really eclectic, so that is a really hard question, but if I had to just pick one, I'm going to say Phil Collins. But I also listen to Kanye West, and Kendrick Lamar and Anita Baker and Pink Floyd. It's all over the place.
If you won the Powerball, what is the first thing you would buy?
Honestly, I make this joke all the time. If I came into a tremendous amount of money, I really would love to try to help the state of Florida have some sort of transportation, train, monorail, just some way to get folks around the state easier.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Do you remember what you ate for breakfast?
Never eat breakfast. I can't stand it.
56% of American workers felt they were too busy to make breakfast in the morning during the work week.
Alrighty then. Besides automated dog walkers, what do you think AI is going to look like in 10 years?
I think in 10 years, artificial intelligence will be a lot further along than it is today.
I'll be back.
Pancakes or waffles?
Probably waffles, because the crevices can hold the butter and the syrup.
In the morning, I'm making waffles.
Besides super chunk fudgy peanut butter ice cream, what's your favorite flavor?
I don't like ice cream.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Would you rather always have to whisper or always have to shout?
Always have to whisper.
What's that?
Excuse me?
Who's your favorite Seinfeld character?
Elaine. Can you do that?
Do you think we really landed on the moon?
I do.
Several photos of the moon's surface have been taken over the decades, showing Apollo lunar module exactly where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin parked it 50 years ago.
After, of course, eating food and beer, where's the first place you would take visitors in Sarasota besides the beach?
I always say if you ask 5 people their favorite thing to do in Sarasota County, you're going to get 5 different answers.
That's just maddeningly unhelpful.
So, my personal answer would be recommending someplace fabulous to go and have a cocktail and a light bite and people watch or watch the sunset. Lately, I've really been enjoying Adeline.
All right, Erin. So we understand that Visit Sarasota has their own podcast. We're happy to have you on the podcast. But we want to shine a little light on your podcast as well. Tell us about the behind the masterpiece.
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have different audiences. We have these different verticals that we're marketing to. Anyone, again, who's in business, you can't be everything to everyone. And so we know what markets we need to go after. We know what markets produce. And one of those is specifically targeting that arts and cultural enthusiast. They love our community. We are Florida's cultural coast. That is an intellectual property that we own here in Sarasota County. And so as we're looking at how do we get in front of that arts and cultural enthusiast, we absolutely are pretty much doing that in a very low funnel way. We're going to be hitting them up, with digital ads that are going to get their fingers to book. We want to get their fingers to book that hotel room and to start booking those tickets. Well, when you do all of your marketing in that low funnel space, which is a fantastic space, it tends to be a little less expensive and it's very easily trackable. You aren't planting seeds. And so while we started to look at, hey, we need to get back into that high funnel space, we need to start being aspirational and inspiring folks to want to travel here, we worked with our arts groups with how we could do that. And one of them was to do a specific podcast focused on the arts and cultural community here in Sarasota County. So it's called Behind the Masterpiece. And we're doing 52 episodes this year. We're pretty much about halfway through that. It's a lot. So kudos to you guys for doing a podcast. A lot of research that is involved in it.
Our great guests make it easy,
Well,
a lot of research. You haven't watched this before, huh?
But we have 2 gentlemen right now that host. Jeffrey Kin, who is the executive director of Sarasota Rising. He was with the Players for many years. He's an accomplished performer himself, and Brian Hirsch, who's the CEO of the Arts Alliance. He's also a musician by trade. So they do a phenomenal job interviewing the guests because this is their area of expertise. So.
Love it. Yeah,
What kind of guests do you have on?
Artists, whether they paint, musicians, actors, opera singers. We had someone from the circus. So really highlighting all of the different arts and cultural stories of the community.
That makes a lot of sense because, I think one of the things the arts community does here is we kind of play well together. And kudos to the Arts Alliance for being one of the organizations that makes that possible. But it's also the kind of the personalities and the quality we have here that I think people don't really feel as threatened.
Yes.
So we can kind of all market each other in addition to our own little corners.
Well,
Yes.
and as we've learned just through having the podcast, the arts and culture community here is much larger than even being born and raised here, growing up here, than I ever even knew. You know, I knew we had art exhibits, I knew we had Ringling, I knew we had all of these things, but I didn't know how big of a draw it was for that arts and cultural community until we had some of those, you know, individuals on the podcast, like chamber orchestras and, you know, Nick Walenda and, you know, the circus and the rich
Circus
history
arts,
we
right.
have in the circus arts here. So, yeah, I mean, all of this has been eye-opening for us even as well. Now, would you say that that is kind of your biggest market for a Visit Sarasota? Is it, if you had to compare people visiting for arts and culture or people visiting for, you know, white sandy beaches, who are we drawing more in? From which one?
So what I always love to say when people ask me that is we are a destination of ands, not ors.
Both ands,
You
huh?
can
There you
love
go.
the beach and love art. You don't have to
It's
choose.
a great answer.
You're welcome.
Speaking of beaches, the number one beach, you know, all those, I think there's a few different, like Dr. Beach and a few other publications to come up with the number one beach. How hard do you guys work to get us to the number one beach?
You know
Or
what?
do you guys at all?
That's a really great question. Very hard. I have traveled extensively with Dr. Beach.
Junkets.
I took Dr. Beach to London once to help market.
Figure out that Siesta Key is the best beach.
Take them to some bad beaches.
London, not known for the beach.
You know, and he's a very smart, ethical man. By no means can he be bought. We took him to London, in fairness, after he had named us number one, but it was to do some press in the UK and to have a subject matter expert talking about, you know, I always like to say, I know a little bit about everything in Sarasota County, but I am a subject matter expert on things to do, destination marketing. But like when you get into the nitty gritty, people don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from subject matter experts. And so it was, to me, it was smart to, once he had given us that accolade, to take him around and then to prop him up, to let him talk about why he chose Siesta Key Beach, what makes our Court Sand so special, etc. But same thing with Travel Zoo and TripAdvisor and all of these lists, Southern Living and U.S. News and World Report. We work very hard on accolades. Like, for example, Selby Gardens, what a huge, fabulous attraction in our community. It was our PR firm that will nudge us to say, hey, did you see applications are open for, you know, Time Magazine? And then we'll say, hey, Selby, what do you think about putting in for this? So I think a lot of times folks don't necessarily understand how that accolade machine works. And I'm really proud that our team is kind of the one, you know, pedaling the wheels, but again, putting other people out in front.
Yeah, because it's not Visit Sarasota that's bringing people into Sarasota. It's the things that Visit Sarasota is promoting. And so going to Selby and saying, hey, you guys should apply for this. I mean, no offense, but Visit Sarasota is not winning the accolade for, you know, best destination. You know, it's
absolutely.
Selby.
Best orchid collection.
Yeah,
or
right.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't own a hotel. I don't own a restaurant. I'm not serving meals. We are marketers.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, and this was something else too, talking about how much the industry's changed in 20 years. You know, gosh, we used to be so proud when somebody would be on our website and would be on our website for a long time. Well, now I want them on your website where they can buy something, they can book something.
Oh, you mean like time spent on the website?
The website
metrics. Yeah, gotcha.
But in a way, you described the Smurfs. What is it again? The
Smurf, social, military,
Right.
fraternal. It's kind
so
of
like organizations that you can recruit to hold an event here or a gathering or whatever. Okay. So, but in a way, those folks, as well as the centers of influence, like the magazines and the things you apply for, those are your wholesalers. Right, and the end clients are like the customers, the people bringing their money here.
Yes, I mean, you know, for us at Visit Sarasota County, one of our biggest clients would be that buyer, that travel agent, that tour operator, that meeting planner. You know, and especially what we love about meeting planners, for example, is you could be a meeting planner that plans lots of meetings for lots of different companies. And so by having that one relationship, we're now booking this association, that association, this meeting, that meeting, this board meeting. So, you know, again, we're trying to be as smart as we can with the dollars that we have to get as much bang for our buck.
Are there any notable ones you brought here that you could share?
Generally speaking, and hotels don't really like to
announce
loudly share who's coming.
Right.
And in fact, again, this is something else that's really changed in the industry. Remember 15 years ago when you would walk into a hotel and there would be like leaderboards, reader boards of who they're welcoming? Notice those don't really exist anymore as much as they used to, and it's because different sales teams from different hotels would walk through and see who was coming and then try to market to them and say, hey, we can beat your rate. So
genius,
yes,
really.
It is genius.
Cutthroat, but genius.
So a lot of times when we do help hotels book these meetings, we try not to share unless they want to, unless the meeting does. But
what about in the past?
There's a level of discretion to this business.
Here we go.
That you wouldn't understand.
Of course not.
What about in the past?
You know, I can remember one of the biggest meetings that we held for a long time was John Deere. If you sold a piece of John Deere equipment, you used to have to come to Sarasota every year for their annual meeting. And they outgrew us. It was sad, but we are a small meetings market.
Yeah.
We do not have a big convention center. We are not Tampa. We are not Orlando. And I don't know that this community wants to be that, right? So we have to be very strategic about the kind of meeting and group that we're going after. It's going to be a little bit of a smaller group.
You mentioned dollars a minute ago. Walk us through TDT, what that exactly is, and what that does for Visit Sarasota, and then I've got a more specific direction after that.
Sure. So tourist development tax in the state of Florida, there are laws attached to what each penny can and cannot be spent on. Lots of laws and statutes. And in every county, they then have the right to charge 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, depending on how big their collections are. And then county commissioners have some leeway as to how those tourist development tax dollars are spent. So here in Sarasota County, we collect 6 pennies, 6% of tourist development tax. So you are only paying tourist development tax, TDT, if you are staying in a short-term rental accommodation. So legally, if you're in Sarasota County and you are renting anything under 6 months, you should be paying tourist development tax. The good news there is it's the landlord or the person who's renting the room, it's their responsibility to, in essence, collect that tax and remit it.
I'm sure there's a lot of Airbnbs and VRBOs that are not paying that.
Airbnb and VRBO collects it.
Really? Okay.
Yes. When that law passed many years ago, our bed tax collections went up millions of dollars a year. So folks staying in the vacation rental market are absolutely paying tourist development tax. So in Sarasota County, 2 years ago, when we started collecting over $30 million, that was what enabled us to add the 6 penny. And when I say we, that was a decision our 5 county commissioners made. So we now collect 6 pennies here in Sarasota County, but have only been collecting 6 pennies for the last 2 years. Used to be 5. But just to put things into perspective,
what did that do from 5 to 6? What did
20%.
that make the number?
Millions. Millions.
Thanks, Trey.
Last year, we collected, Sarasota County collected a little over $48 million just in tourist development tax. To put that into perspective, I'd say 10 years ago, we were collecting around $15 million.
Wow.
So in 10 years for TDT tax to go from 15 to over 48, and it did increase.
300%.
It did increase.
Wow. Good
and
job.
it did not increase just by the 1 penny. It actually increased 2 pennies over that decade. But real high level, tourist development tax pays for a lot of things in this community that residents get to enjoy. I mean, right off the bat, the biggest chunk of TDT tax goes...
You went there. I was going to ask you that question, but you already went there. You're smart.
Yes.
All right, let's go.
The biggest chunk goes to beach maintenance and beach renourishment. So here in Sarasota County, it is free to park at the beach. It's free to get over the bridges to go to the beach. That's not necessarily true with some of our neighbors to the north and to the south, where you may have to pay a toll to get over a bridge, or you may have to pay...
Boca Raton.
Yes. So, the biggest chunk goes to beach maintenance and beach renourishment, but some other things that TDT tax goes to in Sarasota County is our 2 spring training facilities. So Ed Smith Stadium and Cool Today, Nathan Benderson Park, which is a world-class rowing facility, our Arts Alliance grants, For those arts groups that are doing things to attract tourists, they get to apply for a grant where the funding comes from tourist development tax. We have an indoor sports facility. A lot of people don't necessarily know about this, but to your question about what's coming, an indoor sports facility has been approved. Right now, it's kind of being designed.
When you say
Will
indoor
that have
sports,
pickleball?
yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. When you say indoor sports, what kind of sport?
So the research is being done now to determine what we should be utilizing this facility for. However, I will say the folks at the county are very smart. They absolutely want to make sure that it's going to differentiate us from other indoor regional sports facilities. Just from what I've heard, taekwondo, cheerleading, perhaps indoor soccer, wrestling. I mean, they want the facility to be
Niche.
very diverse in that it can handle a lot of indoor.
So like a sportsplex. Are you talking about what they want to put in that Tuttle corridor there by the other stuff or
no,
something different?
so this would be over by Nathan Benderson Park.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
So
They've even talked about making sure too that it's like para friendly, so that then perhaps we could go after like different para sports and whatnot. So I mean, they are absolutely putting thought in now as it's being designed to not just add more of what the community already has or more of what the region has, to make sure that it really is something that differentiates us.
And is utilized.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
now back to the tax thing. The more people that come, the higher the taxes go. Does your budget correlate to that tax income?
No. So,
You don't get rewarded?
well,
Well, because the county commission allocates the budget, right?
they do.
Okay.
And I always like to say in Sarasota County, what I just told you about how the tourist development tax is spent, it's kind of what makes Sarasota County such a really fantastic place for all of us to live, for tourists to visit. Generally speaking, if you look at the pennies and how they're allocated, we're the promotion piece of the penny. And we get around 20%. If you look at the way the penny's collected, we get about 20% of the tourist development tax to, in essence, keep the wheel going.
That's their marketing budget, essentially. It goes to
Correct.
you.
Who gets the biggest chunk? Beach renourishment?
Beach renourishment and beach
Nobody's voting
maintenance.
against that ever.
Oh,
right?
How'd you
absolutely.
guess? She just said it.
Yes.
Is that what gave it away?
I don't think she said
Rewind
they
the
got
tapes.
the biggest portion of the pie.
Rewind the
All right.
tapes.
My second question of the day. How much easier do you think it is to market Sarasota versus marketing Michigan? On the surface, I feel like your job's much easier than these people up in Michigan.
Well, so I will say, it was funny when you talked about the Michigan commercials earlier. I mean, the fact that I immediately saw that Pure Michigan logo in my head,
They're doing
and
a good
I
job.
immediately said Pure Michigan, I'm just going to tell you, marketing works. I mean,
Yeah.
we could sit here and talk about what are some of the destination brands that I love New York, Virginia is for lovers. Like some of those quintessential, because Pure Michigan is a destination marketing brand. So I do think they're killing it up in Michigan. They're doing a phenomenal job.
But their bang for buck can't go as far.
However, I thank my lucky stars every
Come
day
ice fish on Lake Michigan.
that I get to market Sarasota County, because this, to me, is my home. I grew up here. I'm raising my children here. So for me, I would prefer to market Sarasota County, but I
course.
will say I do think Michigan is a beautiful place to visit.
That's why it came to mind. I mean, it was the first one that came to mind because the Pure Michigan stuff.
I've never thought about visiting Michigan in my life. Not once.
To be fair,
no matter how much they spend
Trey's
on
not much of a
commercials.
traveler, so it's
There's a lot of overlap between here and there too, because we draw a lot of Midwesterners, right? So that's why I've gone to Michigan. There's people who live down here from up there.
Yeah.
Nice
Midwest
young
is a
lady.
huge market.
Maybe.
Well, there's something called a neighborhood navigator pass. Tell us about what that is, because it sounds interesting.
Sure. It's interesting because, so again, I mentioned earlier, we like to figure out what are the problems in the tourism industry and how can we utilize marketing support funds to solve that problem. So you guys you've talked about Siesta Key a couple of times, right? I can remember once upon a time there was a perception, all Visit Sarasota County does is market Siesta Key. They should market the other beaches too.
The arts.
Or the arts or anything else. And so we kind of gamified, in essence, a beach pass on our website to not only tell people about all of the different beaches throughout the county, but if you went and visited and checked in, you could go to the visitor center and win all kinds of free prizes. So our navigator, our neighborhood navigator pass is actually somewhat similar to that. It's really trying to just make sure that folks understand all of the different neighborhoods and all of the unique things. It's really more a way to share content. So you guys are in the content business too. We create a ton of content, and I always say content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the pants.
There you go.
So really, it's just a way for us to help distribute the content.
Out of curiosity, what angle do you take to market Turtle Beach?
Listen, different folks like different beaches. And so I think when you go in and you start to read about Turtle Beach, Lido Beach, Blind Pass, Manasota Key, Venice, and you start to do they have bathrooms? What are some of the things that differentiates this beach? Is this beach going to be crowded? Is parking going to be difficult? We're not spinning anything. We're just trying to provide content and information, and then people can make their choice. I know for me, when I go to a beach, I like a quieter beach, So some people, though, oh my God, my 17-year-old. Oh, he wants to
go to Siesta.
He wants to go to Siesta,
Red lifeguard stand.
And he wants
the
to
red
be,
stand.
Yeah.
Red lifeguard stand. I mean, we did throw some rager parties on Turtle Beach.
Yeah.
That was one good thing about Turtle Beach.
Come have a Corona on Turtle Beach.
At nighttime, the parties in the parking lot were always phenomenal. So.
You know what's interesting, and this kind of dovetails into what I wanted to ask you about. Nokomis Beach has different character altogether, and they have that reconstructed Sarasota School of Arts of Architecture Pavilion.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Do you guys do a lot with the architecture thing?
We actually, so that's another really great question, and it kind of goes to show, I could sit here all day and talk about all the different things that we do, but we have created 2 different pieces on our architecture. So one on the School of Architecture, more of that modern, but then also the Venice architecture. There's a lot of interesting, Venetian architecture. So we actually have 2 different architectural books that we have created over the last 10, 15 years that actually speaks to the architecture. So again, it kind of goes back to, am I running an ad campaign on architecture? No. If I ran ad campaigns on every single cool thing that there is to do, the ad budget would be so spread thin, it wouldn't mean anything to anyone. But architecture does kind of fall under that arts and cultural enthusiast, and then we absolutely have a ton of content on our website about architecture.
Where is the most marketing money spent from Visit Sarasota? Like what vertical? What platform. Whether it's maybe platform 2, Facebook, Google, that kind of stuff. But vertical meaning marketing the beaches is number 1, or marketing arts and culture is number 1. How do those rank and stack up?
I think so in fiscal year 25, which is the fiscal year that we're in now, we have 9 audiences that we're going after, and by no means are those 9 audiences equal.
Right.
In fact, I'll be very honest. The one that we spend the least amount of money on is that relocation vertical. So we're putting effort into that space, but it is the smallest amount of effort.
Go right on up. There's number 9, number 8, number 7.
I would say the biggest vertical is probably that general leisure marketing. That, right now we're running a seasonal campaign called the Sarasota Keys Are Calling. It really just kind of speaks to, gorgeous Longboat Key, gorgeous Siesta Key. There's some great visuals, Venice Beach. But, I think it's really kind of that, just that general leisure. Again, very low funnel because it's inexpensive and your finger is on the button about to click because I want to convert. We don't just do advertising and sit back. We're looking at the data every day to figure out what's working, what's not working, where do we need to pause, where do we need to pivot. I mean, goodness, during the election, there was a lot of advertising we paused because it wasn't converting.
Too much noise.
Wasn't going to be effective at all.
Too much noise. So we underspent our budget in fiscal year 24 by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, those are funds that get to go into the reserves at the county. It's not money that we're sitting on. It's money that stays with the county, which is good. That's where it belongs. We're not just spending money on ads because we can. We want to make sure that what we're doing is meaningful. So, right now, that's what's moving the needle.
But that campaign is interesting, if we could touch on it for a second, because, you use the Visit the Keys.
No.
Or we'll visit
the Keys of Sarasota.
The
Keys of Sarasota are called.
We have always been very careful to not utilize the word keys
Right.
in our advertising because people get confused and they think of the Florida Keys. So we have never used the word keys before. So with this seasonal campaign, which is a really small blip of a campaign, we're testing the Sarasota Keys are calling. It's kind of a but we were talking about this the other day and we were like, but we are Siesta Key. We are
Longboat Key,
We are Longboat Key. We are Minnesota Key. And this campaign really was kind of born by one of our TDC members, Mike Holdren, is calling me up and
I know Mike,
talking about,
I'm assuming you mean Junior.
Huh?
Yes.
You mean Junior?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
We've been as a father as well.
Yes. But it stems from, and again, because we have been doing a lot of work post-storm, work that we would not have been doing had the storms not happened. But this is still kind of a residual effect of that we felt like it would be important to test the Sarasota Keys are calling to really draw attention of all of these things that you can do on the Sarasota Keys. And we're seeing how it's working right now.
I think there's also a psychological effect when people come down to Florida. They like to say, I'm going to like this island destination. I'm going to Longboat Key. I'm going to Siesta Key. I'm going to Lido Key. They don't want to say they're going to Fort Myers or Sarasota as much. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because it's got that. It's psychological.
I have sat in focus groups before where, I'm on the other side of the glass and you'll be asking people if they've ever been to Sarasota before and they'll say no.
No, went to Siesta Key once or something.
And then 5 minutes later they say that they vacation every year in Siesta Key. So you're absolutely right.
We've probably all met people in our lives that, whether we're in a different location, we tell them we're from Sarasota, and they're like, oh, that's awesome. I went to Siesta Key once. And it's like, well, yeah, that's Sarasota. And they don't know them apart necessarily. So.
And tourists don't care about county lines. Because my funding comes from Sarasota County Tourist Development Tax, I am charged with promoting Sarasota County entities. My good friends in Manatee are doing the same for Manatee. My good friends in Charlotte are doing the same thing in Charlotte. However, we would be cutting our nose off to spite our face to not want to collaborate and work together where it makes sense. For example, with the Marriott Palmetto, that is a very big hotel attached to a lot of meeting space. The Sunseeker Hotel down in Charlotte is a very large hotel, 600 rooms.
That place is great.
Lots of meeting space. So if my meeting sales planner, Chantel Norman, don't know if you guys have ever met her, but she's the lead singer of Jaw Movement. And
we're in talks with her to come on here and do something special.
She's phenomenal, but tell me who's going to walk by a trade show booth with her working it and not stop and talk, right? But she does a phenomenal job because first and foremost, she is trying to get you booked into a Sarasota County hotel. But the second she realizes you're looking for something that none of our hotels can service, then she is going to recommend the Sunseeker or the Marriott in Palmetto because I would rather have you in this region than lose you to Orlando or to Fort Lauderdale. And that's something, too, our county commission has been very supportive of because rising tides really does raise all boats. And if you're at one of those hotels, there's a good chance you're going to day trip over here, realize this place is pretty cool, and come back.
Definitely.
I like how you said pretty cool instead of said better. This place is better and then come back, but well said.
Well, one other thing I wanted to ask about sports tourism. I mean, because you talk a lot about heads in beds.
Well, we just wrapped up spring training, so it's a great time to...
Yeah, but even just more than the spring training that the tax, apparently I learned today, pays for in part, but also the synergies with IMG, the soccer complex, et cetera. What do you guys do with that?
Yeah.
Rowing.
So two members of our team, Pete and Nate, their pure function is to go after the sports business. Pete has been with us for only 3 or 4 years, but what's really cool about Pete is he came to us from Buffalo. So again, wasn't hard to convince him to come down to the Florida sunshine from Buffalo, but he knows everybody. He has been working in this arena for over 40 years. And so he knows everybody. But, part of what he does, and Nate Sweetman, who helps him, is they're working with event right holders. They're filling out bids. They're working with coaches. And again, it's not just sales. That's not the only way, the boots on the ground approach these conferences or these meetings that they're going to. We will also do, for example, targeted ads in publications that they read. We will do postcard mailers. I can remember a couple of years ago, we did one specifically to all of the swimming coaches around the country about our swimming facilities, trying to get them to bring their teams down here. So sports is a huge, huge part of what we do. And we actually, not only do we do the bids to try to get them to land here, not only do we have the relationships to get them educated on what we can host. We work with the hotels to get them their room blocks, but we also do incentives. So any incentive that we're doing is after event, and it's tied directly to actual room nights. So, in a lot of these sports events, there will be some sort of a $2 per room, incentive that the organizer will get afterwards. And then I also, too, will just note, we've had an NIL for the last couple of years with Emma Wyant. So again, local swimmer.
Wait, back. A local swimmer, okay.
Yeah, so
explain it.
Emma Wyant went to Riverview High School, swam for Virginia initially, but the last couple of years at the University of Florida, not only medaled in the most recent Olympics, but medaled in the Olympics 4 years prior. And so we did an NIL agreement with her, name, image, and likeness. And what was cool about the NIL agreement that we did with her was that it was to talk about Sarasota County being a great place to swim, to train, and compete, but there was also a lifestyle piece where she was just in a pool at Art Ovation or at her favorite ice cream shop on Siesta Key at the Village. And so, again, we try to do creative things to target those audiences because the sports audience is a huge audience.
That's very smart. And we've also got Postgame here, which is one of the leading companies in that space. That's a startup in Sarasota. You wouldn't think it'd be here, but sports economy's got a lot of potential.
Well, and the thing too, and I say this as a mom to 2 teenage boys, we travel for sports. It's kind of inflation proof. I mean, if your son's soccer team or your daughter's softball team has made it, it doesn't really matter what it costs you're going.
That's a good point.
Because you don't want to let down your child who has worked so hard. You don't want to let down their team. I mean, there's a lot of psychology behind sports, but I think that's one of the biggest reasons why sports remains not only a huge push for Sarasota County, but for, let's be honest, most destinations. It's a nice market.
Yeah, even if a kid sits on the bench, they're going to take them to that game. So
Felipe, don't get into your sob stories.
Oh, here we go.
we know.
They used to call them left out.
All right. So as we near the end of this, wrapping up, I wanted to kind of highlight the the biggest attractions or the biggest things that are coming up for Visit Sarasota, the biggest things you would be promoting. I think I have an idea of where you might go with this, but what are some of the biggest developments in the future that you guys are looking forward to?
Well, at the end of the day, we want to promote everything. If you've got some sort of a cool event happening that a tourist might want to go to, we're going to promote it for free, whether you're a partner or not. Now, what does promotion mean? You're going to, the first step is to put it on our website. We have a very robust events calendar on visitsarasota.com. That is where my marketing and PR team look to figure out what am I highlighting on social media, where am I sending out a photographer or a videographer, what am I creating content on? Okay, what pieces of content are going to be in our e-newsletter? I mean, we have an e-newsletter that goes out to 80-some-odd thousand opted-in
I feel like it should be a lot more than that, too.
Well, I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, it was a couple 100,000, but we're pretty good about cleaning it up.
Yeah.
I'm frugal, and I like to do things that make sense, and I don't want to be sending out emails to folks that aren't opening them, or they're not converting, or they're bouncing back. So we do.
Or maybe they're residents now.
A lot of residents utilize our stuff. I mean,
I find myself on that calendar often looking for things to do with the kids.
Yes,
I have 2 young kids.
Absolutely.
What's going on? Even if you just Google it, you guys, come up.
Yes. So, I always tell people, if you've got something going on, put it on the events calendar, because that's your portal to getting all different kinds of press content those sorts of things. We also have a website or email, pitch us at visitsarasota.com. So a lot of folks have added us to their press distribution list, which is another really great way. So I mean, we want to promote everything. I laugh. Sometimes people call us and they want to. I always call it a bag of cash. I don't have bags of cash to give away.
Dang, really?
I
You would have thought.
Right. They're like, but you're the government. You have all the
got all
money,
that,
right?
You got all that TDT.
I'm like, I'm getting, you want a bag of cash. I don't have a bag of cash to give you.
What about a coupon?
Is it like one person's job to vet what goes on that calendar? Because my problem with calendars around here is when I'm looking for things for, especially guests coming to town to do, I look on these calendars and it's like, some of the stuff on there is like, you know, one guy in his basement playing a guitar, all are invited, BYOB. You know, I'm just like, that's not an event. You know,
Get off Facebook, because that sounds like where you're looking at us on Facebook.
Yeah, like something like that. But
It does have to be approved. We do have a marketing manager
so I knew that there was
looks
something
at it.
process,
Every once in
right?
a while, we do have standards that it has to meet, and there's things that absolutely get put in that we're like, okay, an HOA meeting probably
Right.
isn't something that a tourist is
Not a
going to want
tourist
to go
attraction.
to. But I mean, you know, that's really kind of, we want to promote everything. We want to create content. We want to distribute that content. That's kind of like one whole machine that we've got going. You know, but we really try to focus on those audiences, you know, and I talked about the arts and cultural audience. You know, another really big audience is that outdoor nature. People want to come here and they want to enjoy the outdoors.
Mayaca
They want
State
to enjoy
Park.
the weather. They want to, I mean, birding is such
Oh, man.
huge business.
I live off of Palmer. Trust me, I see the cameras. It's everywhere.
Plein air, you know, that's the group that paint. They sit outside and they paint. That's, you know, a huge market too. So, I mean, really, we you know, I always say we do not have something for everyone. Like, we're better than that. You know, you can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
So we really try to look at our community, look at what differentiates us from other Florida communities, and we really try to go all in on that.
I love it. I love it. Well, before we flip it over, is there anything that we haven't covered that you feel like would be important to highlight for Visit Sarasota, or do we do a pretty good job?
You did a great job. You know, I think most people just have no idea that we exist. Our funding comes from tourist development tax that only tourists are paying unless you staycation, which I do think residents do from time to time. I know I have. And the overwhelming majority of the TDT does not come to us.
Yeah.
It's going to all of these other really amazing things.
So don't come looking for bags of cash.
Don't come looking for bags of
But
cash.
I think that pitch me feature, I mean, we could highlight that a little bit and see if you guys get a little bump there.
Sure, no, that would be great.
Because I think a lot of people, like you said, they're not aware of not only how much money you have and how much you do with that money, but that you're here to serve everybody.
You know, and I also just, you know, we are a private-public partnership. If you look around the state of Florida, we are not all the same. Our good friends to the north and the south, in Manatee and Charlotte, who we do so much with on a weekly basis, they are county government. So that changes things. They operate differently than we do. And I always say one is not right and one is not wrong. But for us, being a private-public partnership, I know that for the county commission here in Sarasota County, they love, we call it skin in the game, that the industry is putting a little bit of skin in the game. So I am tasked with raising 10% of private funds every year for the public dollars that I'm getting, and we do it.
How far do you exceed that? Or is it pretty close to 10%?
It's pretty much, it's right at probably that 10%.
11.1.
Sometimes a little bit more, but we utilize those funds to make our public dollars go further.
Got it. I love it.
But I would think you'd have to have a pretty good value proposition to raise money, because giving money to the government, or in this case, a public-private partnership, is like bringing sand to the beach. I mean, you know, you see all that money and you're just like, why do you need my money?
Yes.
Right?
We had coincidentally.
They run lean.
We do run lean.
You do run lean.
We had a partner coffee this morning, and just randomly, one partner came up to me and she said to me, if you ever need a mouthpiece to talk about what great things your organization does, she goes, call me. But, you know, I think being a private-public partnership, we have a phenomenal team. You know, I've been there for 20 years. There's a couple of other folks on our team that are 18, 17, 16. Chantel has been with us for over 10 years. We're known for responding to emails 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You know, we really
You're
love
crushing
our job.
it. You're crushing it.
I was
We're
really,
You can say it.
I was really just giving you a long-winded compliment.
Thank you.
Because obviously, if
You're
they're
good at that.
you know, that's what I do. Obviously, if they're bringing you money, they see the value in what you do, and I think now some of our listeners will too.
Well, we work for the county, and I say to them every time I report anything to them, I always say to them, you know, I'm listening to you, and this is what I think you want us to be working on, and here are the reports. But if there are different numbers, metrics you want to see, let me know. We will share them with you. If there's new directions we should be going in, new collaborations we should be looking at, that's what we want to do. Everything we do is in the sunshine, and we're proud of it. You know, we live our lives at work, and we spend these dollars in a way that we're proud.
Love it. Well, with that being said, we talked a little bit about traffic. I alluded to the fact that we'd be talking about it later on in the podcast, so I'll pass it over to Trey for the famous question.
Tominator Law, our first sponsor, wants to know, what are your thoughts on roundabouts? Do you love them or do you hate them?
I love them.
Tell us why.
Did you always love them? Like when they started popping up around town, did you love them then? Or have they grown on you?
You know what? I've never thought of that before, but I think I'm going to go with they've grown on me.
I think that's the sentiment of the podcast. You know, 94 episodes in, it started off with a lot of hatred and, resentment towards these roundabouts. But I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of our guests have become accustomed to them a little bit. And be careful looking into this because it will absolutely just suck you in. You won't be able to look away. But
that's beautiful.
I tend to agree with you. You know, they're working. They're working.
I like them, and I do think they're working. And we actually have content on our website about roundabouts.
Is it educational on how to use them?
Educational on how to use them.
We are like in far more ways than we are different. That's why we talk about roundabouts. We want to educate the public.
Yes.
It's our public service announcement on how to use a roundabout. So give us the cliff notes of what it says on your website.
It basically just does to seriously talk about, how
Don't stop.
right of
Go.
way and all of that stuff. But the city of Sarasota called us, their communications team, and was like, hey, can you help us make sure tourists are educated on what they are and how to use them?
Have they called us yet, Eric?
Absolutely.
94 episodes later, they haven't called us?
Maybe
Probably
for episode 100 we'll get some grant money.
Probably should tell them to give us a call for sure. We're doing great things for the roundabout community here in Sarasota.
Yeah.
Listen, I seem to be saying this more and more often. You are probably one of the most fit people to answer this question based on your relationships in Sarasota and all of the things that are all of the businesses and things that you're promoting. So I'm going to pass it over to Felipe.
You want to do it today?
No, I don't know how to do it. I could never do it like you.
So you've been on Sarasota SpeaX. You see what we do here. Thank you again. We had a blast. But who do you know who we may not know who Sarasota needs to know? Who should we invite on Sarasota SpeaX?
Can I give you more than one name?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Please. 2 or 3 is fine.
Well,
Yeah.
I think very similar to how I spoke today about the tourism industry. I mean, I think Erin Silk from the EDC could speak very broadly about what they're doing for area businesses. I think you had said.
We can maybe differentiate.
What you guys are doing is very similar. She and I and Brian Hirsch at the Arts Alliance recently created a one-sheeter that literally just talks about how I'm attracting tourists, she's attracting business. He's cultivating, the arts community, but where our funding comes from, what our mission is. But I think both Erin Silk at the Economic Development Corporation and Brian Hirsch with the Arts Alliance of Sarasota County are both doing really meaningful work that benefits the entire community. And probably very similar to us, are doing this good work behind the scenes or under the surface, and to promote others forward.
I don't know either of them, but I know at the EDC, they often switch the directors every few years. I mean, it's not like your position where you've been there 20 years. I've known a few people who've been head of the EDC.
Yeah, but Erin's been there for a few years,
Okay.
and I really do think she's got a strong board in place.
Oh no, I wasn't second guessing her.
Yes.
I just find that interesting. And also I find interesting the Arts Alliance director. There was a gentleman who was there for a very long time.
Jim Shirley, probably.
Right, he's like a legend
yes,
around
he
town.
is.
So it'll be interesting to see what spin the new gentleman would.
Wonderful. Who else you got for us?
Oh, goodness.
That was 2. That was pretty good. And that was
Those are
really
good ones.
fast. Too.
Yeah, Jennifer Romanecki with Selby Gardens.
We had our Lafayette alum.
All right.
Jennifer was
and
great.
with Moat opening,
Yes, we need to get
I
that.
think whether it's Dr. Crosby or Kevin Cooper from their team,
There's the winner.
I think that the aquarium opening up is going to be very
Do you know
exciting.
when it opens? Because I noticed yesterday I was driving by on my way to my BNI networking meeting, and that building looks like a building now. I mean, looks
like a boat.
Yeah, it's got the white cladding up and everything. It's impressive.
I got a tour before the air conditioning was turned on, and I was blown away. They don't think my joke is very funny, though. I always say to them, I've seen Finding Dory. I know how this works. And
How'd you get the tour? How'd you get the tour?
Oh, goodness, I don't know. I asked.
She's, president of Visit Sarasota.
Well, we tried to sign up for a tour through the
president
GCBX a few times, and it got canceled because of the
Well, and it
hurricanes.
wasn't just for me. It was for our board of directors. But I do know, and for good reason, they once it kind of sealed up, they didn't want people seeing it because they're so excited for people to see the final product.
Yeah, but if they know what's
Little
good for them,
suspense.
they'll get Sarasota SpeaX, the team in there.
So it's coming soon?
My understanding is that it's opening at some point in the next year, so it should be soon.
Marker words within a year.
If I had a date, I would tell you.
Well,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it. But while we're at it, anybody on your board of directors who you think would translate well into this platform?
Richard
go there.
Russell is our board chair. He is with the Sarasota Opera. I'm always amazed by the amazing work that they do.
Well, that's going to pretty much fill us up for 2025. So thanks
you
for
go.
all the guest recommendations. We've got our list.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Grab a slice of pizza on the way out.
gosh.
It's
Great meeting
Mr.
you.
Platinum.